It began as a quiet change hidden behind palace doors, that aides dismissed as routine and insiders refused to discuss. But when Queen Camilla's name suddenly stopped appearing in key royal conversations, whispers spread through the corridors of power. Something had shifted, something significant, and at the center of it all stood Prince William. What first looked like a minor adjustment would soon reveal a dramatic realignment of royal influence. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single full update. At first, almost nobody paid attention. Royal households are constantly adjusting schedules, reshuffling responsibilities, and reorganizing internal communications. On the surface, this appeared to be one more routine administrative change. But inside palace circles, people who had spent years watching the delicate balance of royal influence began noticing something unusual. Certain discussions were taking place without Queen Camilla's involvement. Key conversations that once would have automatically included hers suddenly seemed to move forward without her voice in the room. No official statement explained the shift. No palace spokesperson offered clarification. Instead, an unusual silence settled over Buckingham Palace, and that silence quickly became impossible to ignore. According to royal insiders, the first signs emerged during a private strategy meeting involving Prince William, several senior palace advisors, and trusted members of the royal household. Meetings like this are not uncommon, especially during periods when the monarchy is preparing for future responsibilities. Yet what attracted attention was not who attended the gathering, it was who did not. For observers familiar with palace operations, the absence raised immediate questions. Had it been intentional? Was it temporary? Or was something much larger unfolding behind closed doors? As speculation quietly spread, senior staff reportedly began adjusting communication channels throughout various royal offices. Messages that once followed familiar paths suddenly appeared to move differently. Certain advisors found themselves working more closely with William's team. Others were reportedly instructed to focus on long-term planning initiatives connected to the future of the monarchy. None of these developments seemed dramatic on their own. Yet taken together, they painted a picture that many insiders found difficult to dismiss. The deeper people looked, the more they discovered signs that tensions had been building for months. Those closest to palace operations claimed that disagreements over priorities, public strategy, and future planning had gradually intensified behind the scenes. While the public continued to see a united royal front, some insiders believed an entirely different story was unfolding beneath the surface. Relationships remained professional. Appearances remained carefully managed. But according to those familiar with the atmosphere, there was a growing awareness that important decisions about the monarchy's future were increasingly being shaped by Prince William and a carefully selected group of trusted advisors. That realization carried enormous significance. William was no longer simply preparing for a future role. Many believed he was already beginning to shape the institution he would one day inherit. Every meeting, every consultation, and every strategic discussion seemed to point toward a larger objective. The monarchy was entering a new era, and the people guiding that transition were becoming clearer with every passing week. Meanwhile, questions surrounding Queen Camilla's position continued to multiply. Why was her involvement appearing to diminish? Why were communication structures being reorganized? And why did palace officials seem determined to avoid discussing the changes publicly? The absence of answers only intensified curiosity. With each passing day, what had once looked like a routine adjustment began to feel more like the opening chapter of a major royal power shift. But what appeared to be a simple staffing adjustment was actually connected to a much deeper struggle over influence, legacy, and the future direction of the monarchy. For years, Camilla occupied one of the most influential positions within the royal household. Yet insiders now suggest that access once taken for granted was suddenly becoming restricted. Invitations became fewer, consultations became rarer, and the palace's most sensitive discussions appeared to be moving elsewhere. The questions that had quietly emerged in recent weeks were becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss. If the changes surrounding Prince William's growing influence represented the beginning of a larger transformation, then Queen Camilla's changing position appeared to be one of its most significant consequences. For years, her presence had extended far beyond ceremonial appearances and public engagements. Following King Charles's accession, she became one of the most recognizable and influential figures within the royal household, occupying a place close to the center of power during one of the monarchy's most intense. Her role was not simply symbolic. It carried weight, access, and influence that few others possessed. Throughout those early years, Camilla's voice was believed to carry considerable importance across various aspects of royal life. From household operations to major engagements and internal discussions, she was often viewed as someone whose opinions mattered. Palace observers frequently pointed to her growing confidence and visibility as evidence that she had successfully established herself within the institution after years of public scrutiny and personal challenges. It was a remarkable transformation. The woman who once faced immense criticism had become queen, standing beside the king as the monarchy entered a new chapter. Yet power within royal circles has always been fragile. Influence can appear permanent until suddenly it is not. And according to those watching closely, subtle signs suggested that the balance inside the palace was beginning to shift. What made the situation particularly striking was that the changes were not accompanied by public announcements or dramatic confrontations. Instead, they unfolded quietly through altered routines, changing priorities, and a growing emphasis on the future rather than the present. At the center of that future stood Prince William and Princess Catherine. As public confidence in the next generation continued to grow, so too did discussions about long-term succession planning. Senior aides reportedly devoted increasing attention to preparing for the responsibilities that would eventually accompany William's reign. This was not merely about future ceremonies or titles. It was about shaping the structure of a monarchy that could navigate decades ahead. And as those conversations expanded, a new group of decision-makers appeared to be emerging around the Prince and Princess of Wales. That development carried enormous implications. Every institution eventually faces a moment when one generation gradually begins handing responsibility to the next. Within the royal family, that process is rarely straightforward. Tradition, loyalty, personal relationships, and public expectations all become intertwined. As a result, even the smallest adjustment can create ripples far beyond palace walls. Reports began circulating that several future-focused meetings were proceeding without the involvement of certain long-established figures. While no official explanation was offered, insiders increasingly viewed those absences as meaningful. Meanwhile, awareness continued growing that palace priorities themselves were evolving. The focus appeared to be shifting toward continuity, stability, and long-term leadership. Advisors were reportedly looking years ahead rather than weeks ahead. Discussions increasingly centered on what the monarchy would need to become rather than what it had been. For some, that represented necessary preparation. For others, it raised uncomfortable questions about who would remain influential as the transition unfolded. The deeper observers looked, the clearer one reality became. This was no longer simply about changing schedules or administrative adjustments. Something larger was taking shape beneath the surface. Old assumptions were being challenged. New alliances were strengthening. And as the future of the monarchy slowly moved closer, attention increasingly turned toward the trusted figures gathering around William and Catherine. Their growing influence suggested that an entirely new power structure might be emerging inside the palace, one capable of reshaping royal dynamics for years to come. As the structure around William evolved, another development began raising even more questions among those watching palace dynamics closely. The strongest shifts in power rarely happen in public. They happen through trust, alliances, and quiet cooperation. And according to royal observers, William was gradually building exactly that, an inner circle designed for the monarchy's next chapter. The growing questions surrounding Queen Camilla's changing position were now being matched by an equally important development elsewhere inside the royal family. While attention remained focused on who seemed to be losing influence, a different story was unfolding around those who appeared to be gaining it. According to palace watchers, Prince William was steadily strengthening relationships with a group of senior royals who shared a common goal: protecting the institution through a period of uncertainty and preparing it for the future that lay ahead. It was not a sudden campaign or a dramatic takeover. It was something far more powerful. It was the careful construction of trust. At the center of that effort stood Princess Catherine. Over the years, she had earned a reputation for discipline, stability, and an ability to navigate royal responsibilities without creating unnecessary controversy. But insiders increasingly suggested that her role had expanded beyond public engagements and charitable work. Behind the scenes, she was reportedly becoming one of William's most trusted partners in discussions about the future direction of the monarchy. Those familiar with palace dynamics described her not simply as a supportive spouse, but as a key figure whose judgment carried growing weight within important conversations. Yet Catherine was not the only member of this emerging network. Princess Anne, long admired for her unwavering dedication to royal duty, remained one of the most respected figures within the family. Her decades of service had earned her credibility that few could match. Prince Edward brought another layer of experience, offering a steady presence and a deep understanding of how the institution functioned behind closed doors. Alongside him stood Sophie, whose popularity and professionalism had quietly increased over recent years. Together, they represented something that palace insiders increasingly viewed as essential: continuity. As these relationships strengthened, reports began circulating about a new level of collaboration among working royals. Discussions reportedly focused on maintaining public confidence, preserving stability, and ensuring that the monarchy remained prepared for the challenges ahead. While every royal family has its disagreements and competing interests, observers suggested that William's circle was becoming remarkably aligned in its long-term vision. They shared a belief that the institution's future depended on careful planning rather than reactive decision-making. That sense of unity began attracting attention throughout palace circles. Senior aides reportedly praised what they described as a more streamlined leadership approach. Rather than relying on a wide range of competing voices, there appeared to be increasing emphasis on efficiency, coordination, and strategic planning. Some insiders viewed this as a natural evolution. Others saw it as evidence that a new center influence was quietly emerging. Either way, the result was difficult to ignore. Decisions seemed more focused, objectives appeared clearer, and the individuals closest to William were becoming increasingly visible in conversations about the monarchy's future. For William himself, the stakes could hardly have been higher. He was not simply preparing to inherit a crown. He was preparing to inherit responsibility for one of the world's most scrutinized institutions. Every choice carried consequences. Every alliance mattered. The people surrounding him today could play critical roles in shaping the monarchy tomorrow. That reality added a sense of urgency to every relationship being strengthened behind palace walls. Meanwhile, speculation continued growing that this trusted network was becoming increasingly influential. With each passing month, the same names appeared at the center of discussions about continuity, leadership, and long-term planning. The pattern was becoming impossible for observers to ignore. Something important was taking shape beneath the surface. A future leadership structure seemed to be emerging, built not on titles alone, but on trust, loyalty, and shared purpose. Yet as new alliances strengthened, questions grew about who was being left outside the room and why. Then came the development that transformed quiet speculation into a full royal controversy. A series of high-level meetings reportedly took place without Camilla's involvement, triggering intense discussion among palace watchers and media insiders. Until this point, much of the conversation surrounding the palace had been driven by whispers, assumptions, and subtle observations. There were unanswered questions. There were unexplained changes. There were signs that something important was happening behind the scenes. But there was still room for doubt. Many believed the reports could simply reflect routine adjustments within a royal household, constantly adapting to new circumstances. Then came the meetings that changed everything. Suddenly, what had seemed like scattered clues began forming a pattern that was impossible to ignore. According to multiple royal observers, several high-level discussions involving senior advisors and key members of the royal household reportedly moved forward without Camilla's participation. On their own, individual absences might not have attracted much attention. Yet these meetings were different. They focused on matters directly connected to the future direction of the monarchy, the institution's long-term priorities, and the responsibilities that would eventually fall upon Prince William. The fact that such conversations could take place without one of the most senior figures in the royal family immediately fueled intense speculation. What made the situation even more remarkable was the reaction among experienced royal correspondents. These were individuals who had spent decades studying palace routines, observing patterns, and recognizing subtle shifts before they became public knowledge. Many began quietly noting changes that seemed increasingly difficult to explain away. Familiar procedures appeared altered. Certain discussions were becoming more restricted. Access to information seemed tighter than before. The atmosphere itself felt different. No one could fully explain why, but many sensed that the palace was entering a new phase. Meanwhile, staff members reportedly received instructions to exercise extraordinary discretion. Silence became the dominant response whenever questions emerged. Requests for clarification were met with carefully measured answers or no answers at all. This level of caution only deepened the mystery. In royal institutions, secrecy often serves a purpose. But when secrecy becomes unusually strict, it tends to create more curiosity than reassurance. Every unanswered question seemed to generate two more. As speculation intensified, attention increasingly shifted toward Prince William. His future role as king had always been a subject of interest, but now discussions surrounding his preparation appeared more urgent than ever. Some insiders suggested that palace planning was accelerating. Others believed that senior advisors were simply acknowledging an unavoidable reality. The future of the monarchy was drawing closer, and preparations could no longer remain theoretical. Whether driven by necessity or strategy, the result was the same. William appeared to be occupying a larger and more influential position within the institution. The media quickly took notice. Across royal circles, commentators, analysts, and palace observers began examining every development for clues. Articles, discussions, and insider reports increasingly focused on one central theme: influence. Who possessed it? Who was gaining it? And perhaps most importantly, who seemed to be losing it? The questions themselves became part of the story. Every new report added another layer to an already growing controversy. At the heart of the speculation was a perception that power inside the palace was slowly shifting. Not through dramatic announcements or public confrontations, but through quieter mechanisms that often prove far more significant. Influence was being redistributed. Trust appeared to be concentrating around certain individuals. Strategic conversations seemed increasingly focused on the next generation of leadership. What had once looked like isolated developments were now being viewed as pieces of a much larger transformation. Yet even as debate intensified, the most important details remained hidden. Observers could see the consequences. They could identify the changes. They could sense the growing tension. But they still lacked one critical piece of the puzzle. What exactly was being discussed during those meetings? What decisions were important enough to justify such secrecy? And why did those decisions appear to be reshaping relationships throughout the royal household? But the true significance of these meetings would only become clear once attention turned to the decisions being discussed behind closed doors. Behind every major royal decision lies a larger vision. And according to those familiar with palace planning, William was becoming increasingly determined to shape a monarchy that reflected his own priorities, rather than inherited power structures. The unanswered questions surrounding those private meetings now led observers toward an even more significant realization. The discussions taking place behind palace walls were not simply about individual roles or temporary adjustments. They appeared to be connected to something much larger, a long-term vision for the future of the monarchy itself. As royal insiders pieced together fragments of information, a picture began emerging of a Prince of Wales who was no longer content to simply wait for the future. Instead, William seemed increasingly focused on actively preparing for it. For years, conversations about William's eventual reign had remained largely theoretical. They centered on what he might do, how he might lead, and what kind of king he might become. But according to those familiar with palace planning, those questions were beginning to receive practical answers. William's approach appeared to be guided by a clear belief that the monarchy would need to adapt to survive. Not through dramatic reinvention, but through careful modernization, greater efficiency, and a stronger connection with public expectations. That philosophy carried enormous importance during a period of uncertainty. The royal family was navigating changing public attitudes, increased scrutiny, and growing demands for transparency. Every decision seemed to face immediate examination. Every action generated discussion. In such an environment, maintaining public trust became one of the institution's most valuable assets. Those closest to William reportedly understood that reality. Rather than relying solely on tradition, they appeared focused on ensuring that the monarchy remained relevant, stable, and respected for generations to come. As a result, efforts to build a focused team around future responsibilities reportedly accelerated. Advisors with experience in long-term strategy gained greater prominence. Senior royals known for discipline, consistency, and professionalism became increasingly important voices in ongoing discussions. The objective, according to insiders, was not merely to prepare for succession. It was to create a structure capable of handling future challenges with confidence and unity. That objective naturally increased the influence of William's most trusted advisors and allies. Individuals who shared his priorities found themselves playing larger roles in conversations about leadership, public engagement, and institutional stability. Their influence was not based solely on titles. It was built upon trust developed over years of cooperation and shared responsibility. Within royal circles, trust remains one of the most valuable forms of power, and William's growing network appeared to possess it in abundance. Meanwhile, strategic planning became an increasingly important focus behind closed doors. Discussions reportedly stretched far beyond immediate concerns. They explored questions about continuity, succession, public confidence, and the long-term health of the institution itself. Palace observers noted that many of these conversations appeared remarkably future-oriented. Rather than concentrating exclusively on present challenges, attention increasingly shifted toward what the monarchy would need 5, 10, or even 20 years from now. For supporters of this approach, the strategy represented responsible leadership. It reflected a recognition that every generation of royals must eventually prepare the institution for those who come next. But for others, the changes carried more complicated implications. Every effort to strengthen one group inevitably altered the position of another. Every new alliance created new questions. Every shift in influence generated consequences that could not remain hidden forever. As William's vision gained momentum, the effects began spreading throughout the royal household. What started as private planning was gradually reshaping relationships, priorities, and perceptions. The future-focused strategy appeared increasingly successful. Yet success often comes with a price. Behind the growing confidence surrounding William's plans stood individuals whose positions seemed less secure than before. And as observers looked more closely at the human impact of these developments, attention once again returned to the people whose influence appeared to be changing most dramatically. Yet while William's plans gained momentum, the personal consequences of those changes were becoming impossible to ignore. Those closest to the palace say the atmosphere had changed. Familiar routines were disappearing. Long-standing assumptions no longer applied. And for Camilla, the realization that influence could fade proved increasingly difficult to overlook. By this stage, the conversation surrounding the royal family had evolved far beyond questions about meetings and strategy sessions. Attention was now shifting toward the personal consequences of the changes taking place behind palace walls. For months, observers had focused on William's growing influence, the emergence of new alliances, and the apparent restructuring of future leadership plans. But every transformation creates winners and losers, even when nobody openly acknowledges it. And according to those following the situation closely, Queen Camilla increasingly found herself at the center of that uncomfortable reality. Reports continued circulating that her involvement in certain discussions had become more limited than in previous years. While no official confirmation ever emerged, the persistence of the rumors was difficult to ignore. The same questions kept resurfacing. Why were some conversations moving forward without her participation? Why did certain strategic discussions appear concentrated among a smaller group of trusted advisors and senior royals? And why did palace officials remain so reluctant to address the growing speculation? What made the situation particularly fascinating was the contrast between public appearances and private perceptions. To the outside world, royal duties continued as expected. Engagements were attended, commitments were fulfilled. The institution maintained its image of unity and stability. Yet beneath that carefully managed surface, observers increasingly sensed that internal dynamics were evolving. The contrast created a powerful sense of mystery. Publicly, everything appeared unchanged. Privately, many believed a significant shift was underway. As media interest intensified, royal commentators began examining every interaction for clues. Relationships that once attracted little attention suddenly became the subject of detailed analysis. Routine appearances generated endless discussion. Every report, no matter how small, was scrutinized for signs of deeper meaning. The focus was no longer simply on what was happening. It was on what the developments might reveal about the future balance of power within the monarchy. Supporters of Camilla were quick to push back against many of the claims. They argued that speculation had outrun reality, and that changes within palace operations were being exaggerated by commentators eager for dramatic headlines. According to this view, the Queen remained an important and respected member of the royal family, whose contributions continued to carry significant value. They insisted that rumors of diminishing influence misunderstood the realities of royal life and the natural evolution of responsibilities over time. Yet the questions refused to disappear. In fact, they seemed to grow stronger with each passing week. Conversations increasingly turned toward the future. What role would Camilla occupy as William's influence expanded further? How would priorities shift as preparations for the next generation continued accelerating? Would existing relationships adapt smoothly to the changing landscape, or would new tensions emerge as responsibilities evolve? Those uncertainties contributed to a growing sense of unease among palace observers. The monarchy had always depended upon stability, continuity, and carefully balanced relationships. Any perception that those balances were changing inevitably attracted attention. And as strategic planning increasingly focused on the future, many wondered how current figures would fit into the institution's next chapter. Meanwhile, the momentum behind William's vision showed no signs of slowing. His trusted circle remained influential. Long-term planning continued. Discussions about continuity, leadership, and public confidence appeared increasingly central to palace priorities. The future was becoming the dominant focus. Yet that very focus made the human consequences impossible to ignore. Every step toward tomorrow inevitably reshaped the realities of today. The result was a growing tension that could be felt throughout discussions surrounding the royal family. Not necessarily open conflict, but uncertainty. Not public confrontation, but quiet questions about influence, responsibility, and relevance. The story was becoming larger than any single meeting or individual relationship. It was becoming a story about transition itself, about an institution preparing for change while attempting to preserve the stability upon which it depended. But the story was never simply about one individual. It was about a monarchy preparing for its next era. As weeks passed, what began as whispers developed into a broader narrative about succession, authority, and the future of the crown. The palace itself appeared to be entering a period of transformation. What had once seemed like isolated developments were now being viewed as pieces of a much larger story. The questions surrounding Queen Camilla's changing influence, the emergence of Prince William's trusted network, and the increasingly secretive nature of palace planning had gradually merged into a single narrative. It was no longer simply about shifting relationships within the royal family. It was about succession, it was about leadership. And above all, it was about what kind of monarchy would emerge in the years ahead. As public attention intensified, William and Catherine increasingly found themselves at the center of discussions about the future. Their growing prominence was impossible to ignore. For many observers, they represented continuity at a time when uncertainty surrounded so many aspects of the institution. Their public roles had expanded steadily over the years. But now there was a growing perception that their influence behind the scenes was expanding as well. Every appearance, every engagement, and every report seemed to reinforce the belief that they were becoming the defining figures of the monarchy's next chapter. That perception was strengthened by the visible support of other senior royals. Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Sophie continued to be viewed as dependable figures whose commitment to duty remained unquestioned. Together, they appeared increasingly aligned around long-term institutional goals rather than short-term concerns. According to palace observers, there was a growing emphasis on stability, preparation, and preserving public confidence during a period of transition. The message was subtle but powerful. The monarchy was thinking about tomorrow as much as today. Meanwhile, the public itself began sensing that a generational shift might already be underway. This was not a formal transfer of authority. No major announcement had been made. Yet many people felt that the focus of the institution was gradually moving toward the future heirs and the team surrounding them. The conversation had changed. Where previous years often centered on current leadership, increasing attention now focused on who would guide the monarchy through the decades ahead. What made the situation even more intriguing was that many of the most important discussions remained hidden from public view. The secrecy surrounding internal deliberations continued fueling speculation. Observers knew that conversations were taking place. They knew strategic planning was underway. Yet the details remained closely guarded. That silence created an atmosphere filled with mystery. Every unanswered question invited new theories. Every unexplained decision generated fresh curiosity. As a result, belief continued growing that a new governing structure was quietly taking shape within the palace. Not an official structure defined by public declarations, but an informal network built around trust, preparation, and shared objectives. The same individuals repeatedly appeared at the center of discussions about the future. The same priorities continued shaping strategic decisions. Over time, what began as speculation evolved into a widely discussed possibility. Many now believed that the foundations of the next royal era were already being constructed. For supporters, this transformation represented careful stewardship of an institution facing modern challenges. For critics, it raised questions about influence, access, and the balance of power within the family. Yet regardless of perspective, one reality became increasingly difficult to deny. The monarchy appeared to be entering a defining period unlike any it had experienced in years. The choices being made today could influence its direction for decades. That realization gave every development greater significance. Every meeting mattered. Every alliance carried weight. Every shift in responsibility seemed connected to a much larger process unfolding beneath the surface. The story had grown beyond personalities and palace intrigue. It had become a story about the future of the crown itself. And yet, despite months of speculation, countless reports, and endless analysis, one mystery continued to linger above all others. Observers could see the transformation taking place. They could identify the changing dynamics. They could sense the emergence of a new era. But one critical question still remained unresolved, hanging over every conversation about the monarchy's future. And as the future came into focus, one final question remained unanswered. In royal history, endings rarely arrive with announcements. They begin with subtle changes, closed doors, missing invitations, altered routines, and shifting loyalties. According to palace observers, that may be exactly what has been unfolding behind the scenes. Looking back at everything that unfolded, it becomes easier to understand why so many palace observers became convinced that they were witnessing more than ordinary royal adjustments. None of the developments arrived with dramatic declarations. There were no public confrontations. No official statements confirmed that a major shift was underway. Instead, the story emerged piece by piece, hidden within changing routines, evolving relationships, and a growing sense that the monarchy was quietly preparing itself for a different future. What began as whispers about private meetings eventually expanded into questions about influence. Those questions led to discussions about leadership. Those discussions evolved into broader debates about succession, authority, and the future direction of the crown itself. Each development seemed connected to the next, creating a narrative that was impossible to ignore. By the time the pattern became clear, many believed the transformation had already been underway for months. At the center of that transformation stood Prince William. Throughout the story, one theme appeared again and again. His influence was growing. His responsibilities were expanding. His network of trusted advisors and allies was becoming stronger. Whether through careful planning or natural progression, he increasingly appeared positioned as the central figure around whom the monarchy's future would be built. The conversations taking place behind palace walls seemed less focused on what the institution had been, and more focused on what it was becoming. That reality carried enormous significance because every generation eventually reaches a moment when leadership begins shifting toward the future. For decades, royal history has been shaped by those transitions. Some occurred smoothly, others created uncertainty. Yet all of them shared one common characteristic. They forced individuals to adapt to changing circumstances. And according to those watching closely, that challenge appeared particularly relevant for Queen Camilla. For years, she occupied a position of remarkable visibility and influence. Her journey from controversy to acceptance represented one of the most dramatic transformations in modern royal history. Yet even the most influential figures must eventually confront the reality that institutions evolve. Priorities change, responsibilities shift. New leaders emerge. The palace landscape that once seemed familiar can gradually become something very different. For Camilla, observers increasingly believed that reality was becoming impossible to ignore. At the same time, the institution itself appeared focused on adapting to new priorities. Stability became a recurring theme. Continuity became a guiding objective. Long-term planning gained increasing importance. The monarchy was not merely reacting to events. It seemed determined to prepare for challenges that had not yet arrived. That approach reflected an awareness that public trust, institutional strength, and future leadership would play critical roles in shaping the crown's next chapter. As a result, discussions about succession and legacy moved closer to the center of palace strategy. More than ever, attention focused on preserving the monarchy's long-term future. Every alliance, every decision, and every adjustment appeared connected to that broader mission. The institution was looking ahead. The next generation was preparing for greater responsibility. And the foundations of a new era seemed to be taking shape in real time. Perhaps that is why this story captured so much attention. It was never simply about one person's gaining influence or another losing it. It was about transition. It was about the delicate process through which one chapter slowly gives way to the next. It was about the challenge of balancing tradition with preparation, continuity with change, and loyalty with the demands of the future. Today, many questions remain unanswered. Much of what happened behind palace walls may never become fully known. Yet one conclusion continues to emerge from the countless reports, observations, and discussions surrounding these developments. The royal family appears to be entering a new chapter, defined by preparation, evolving leadership, and a growing focus on what comes next. Because while this chapter may have begun with whispers behind palace walls, the consequences could reshape the monarchy for years to come. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.